Hello, and thank you for joining us today to discuss two of the most essential items to your job search, a resume and a cover letter. My name is Desiree Williams, and I serve AKSI as the Digital Education Coordinator, and I will be your webcast producer. Now, before we dive into the content, I would like to review the web-based features available to you. This webinar will be advanced remotely, but at the bottom of your screen, there are multiple application widgets you can use throughout the program. If you are accessing this webinar via a mobile device, you may need to scroll down or over on your screen to access these widgets. Additionally, each of the windows on your screen can be resized and moved to fit your needs. A copy of the slideshow and other additional materials are available in the green resource list widget. The group chat is also available for you to interact with other attendees and the presenters during the presentation. When posting, it will show your first name and last initial, but please say your chapter and university as well. If you have any technical difficulty, please click on the Help widget with the question mark icon. If you have a question throughout the program, you can launch the Q&A widget to submit that. All questions will be discussed at the end of the program in the order they are received. One of the most important steps in the job search process is creating a well-designed, well-written resume and cover letter. Today, we will review the job search process and outline what factors to consider before you begin the search. Our presenters will also discuss the best ways to prepare your resume and cover letter for applications so that you can stand out from the applicant pool. For our program today, Jennifer Beeler and Jessica Kua will present. Jennifer was initiated into Alpha Kappa Psi in fall 2014 at Ball State University, where she graduated with a degree in Human Resources Management in May 2016. Since graduating, she has worked in staffing and as an HR generalist in Indianapolis. Currently, she serves as a co-advisor for her home chapter, Upsilon Chi. Jessica is an alumna of the Psi Upsilon chapter at the University of California, Merced. Professionally, she has had roles in customer service at Sherwin-Williams and Bank of America. Currently, Jessica is an on-site recruiter at Oculus VR for hardware talent. Now, I'll hand it off to our presenters to get us started.
The job search process can be really overwhelming, especially as a graduating senior or a recent college graduate. Even if you already have a few internships under your belt, it's an entirely new experience for most of you, and an extremely important one. You've spent the past 4 or so years preparing for this next step. It's a process that you'll fall back into time and time again throughout your career as you continue to move up the ladder and look for new opportunities. While it may seem daunting now, the process itself is only comprised of a few steps. First, prepare your materials. Have your resume, cover letter, and any supplemental materials ready. Supplemental materials can be a reference sheet, and be sure to ask anyone you're using as a reference beforehand if you can use them as a reference, and describe the relationship you have with that person. Be sure to have someone you trust look over your resume and your cover letter ahead of time, just to make sure that any grammar and spelling issues that you may have missed get called out. Second, you search for open positions. Consider what kind of position you want, where you want to be. Keep all of those factors in mind when you're job searching. You can job search either on the internet, like careers.com, indeed.com, or reach out to friends or your brothers that are in the area you want to be or may have some connections where you want to be. And just put some feelers out. Let them know that you're searching for open positions, and have them put in a word for you or give you a heads up if they know of something that you may be good for. Once you've found a job that you want to apply for, you can either submit your application online if you found an online application, which is a fairly easy process, or you can, if you were referred into a position, you can send the hiring manager your cover letter, your resume, your reference sheet, whatever materials you need, such as your portfolio or anything like that. Be sure to remember that your cover letter in that instance, if you're sending in for a referral, is your introduction. It's going to be their first impression of you, and really that's kind of where your interview process starts. So the next phase of this process is the interview process. So the interview is so much more than just that hour or so that you spend with the recruiter. Your interview starts when you submit your application. because from then on, every interaction you have with somebody in the company could potentially impact their hiring decision. So just make sure that you're putting your best foot forward, and the best way to do that is to relax and be yourself. Be confident in your skills and abilities and your experiences. If all goes well and you receive a job offer, and if you're lucky enough to receive multiple, take time to consider each option and weigh your pros and cons, decide what option is going to be best for you, and be sure to respond in a way that's polite and timely, and in a way that's not going to close the door that you might otherwise want to be open later down the line. This webinar will specifically focus on the first step of preparing your materials and getting yourself ready for the next step in the process.
So before you start your job search, there's a number of factors that are important to consider. These factors will play an important role in how you tailor your resume and cover letter based on what jobs you are considering applying for. A few factors to consider are, what type of position do you want? What matches your skill sets? So what are you good at? What do you like to do? Think about some classes where you were engaged and enjoyed the material. Even if you have the experiences or interests, you aren't limited to what you just studied. Many degrees are applicable in other areas. For instance, if you studied marketing, you could potentially work in PR and communications, event planning, social media management, project management, and even consulting. Another thing to think about is the industry. What would excite you on a daily basis? So do you have a passion working with children? Do you enjoy technology? What kinds of technologies excite you? Different industries also have expectations and environments. So think about what your cutoffs are. For example, the medical industry is very fast-paced, as there will always be a demand for healthcare. Other industries like law may not have a strict 9 to 5, but there may be times where you will have to work outside the normal hours. If these scenarios are not ideal, it may be best to avoid these industries. Thinking about location is important and will also help narrow down your search. For instance, do you want to be near your family? Do you want to move to a new state? Think about your commute as well. Do you want your commute to be under or over 30 minutes? It's important to understand what are some factors that are important in your life. These will help narrow your search and prevent you from applying to jobs that wouldn't be a good match to your interests.
Once you're ready to start the process, you'll need to make sure you have all of your materials ready to start applying. It's important to remember you're going to want to tailor all of your materials for each individual position, but having a generic one ready to go gives you a place to jump off. The materials you'll need to have are your resume, your cover letter, other materials such as your LinkedIn profile or your portfolio. Other materials might not always be needed depending on the position you're applying for. Your LinkedIn profile can serve as an extended or digital version of your resume, especially if you're tailoring your resume to an individual position, but you have a lot more experience that you want to talk about. It's a way of giving the recruiters some additional material to scroll through and get to know you a little bit better. Portfolios will mostly come into play with design roles or roles such as marketing or journalism when you have to have samples of your work on hand to demonstrate your ability. Now we're going to break down each of these components individually.
Your resume is the most important job search material that you will need. A resume is a personalized advertisement of your skill sets. Even if you aren't currently looking, you should always have your resume up to date. A common question is, what should the resume look like? There is no right or wrong style or format. You do want to consider your audience. For example, creative rules may allow you to be more graphic with the format, whereas most industries prefer a standard design. You do want to include your contact information in the header. This should be a very simple and easy way for recruiters to find your information. Some people ask if a summary or an objective are really needed anymore, and that's up to you. It's a great way to showcase that this resume was tailored for this application. You do want to include your education, so where you went, what you studied, when you graduated. Some people also like to include a GPA as well. For the experiences, you do want to think about how they are relevant to the role you're applying for. For example, if you're applying for an analyst role, think about some experiences that you've had involving collecting data, maybe for a class assignment. For the skills, again, think about how they're relevant to the role you're applying for. If you're looking for a software engineer role, put down some languages that you're most proficient in. Other things to include are volunteer work, professional affiliations like Alpha Kappa Psi, and maybe some honor and awards that you've received. Showcase your achievements. There are some things to avoid putting on your resume as well. Things to not include are low GPAs, pictures, and make sure you don't put any fabricated information on your resume. All the information on your resume should be truthful, because anything that you put on your resume may be called out by your recruiter. Other people also ask, how long should the resume be? Your resume should really be one page. Like I said earlier, it really is a personalized advertisement of your skill sets. So if it is longer than one page, you may run the risk of it being looked over. Again, the resume is the biggest point in your job search. It is a way to showcase your skill sets in a very clean and concise way, and you want to make sure you make it your own.
Cover letters serve as your introduction and should accompany your resume to provide further explanations and address any gaps your resume may have. So when do you need a cover letter, or do you even need one? If you're applying online, it doesn't hurt to attach a cover letter. It certainly can leave a lasting impression on your hiring manager, but you definitely need a cover letter if you are applying for a position you were referred into by someone you know. Cover letters should always just be a few paragraphs. They shouldn't be more than one page. Keep your cover letter short, succinct, and to the point. It should include an introduction, just explaining who you are, why you're reaching out. Provide a few highlighted examples that demonstrates your abilities and why you're a good fit for the job. If you have any significant gaps in your experience or on your resume, explain a little bit, discuss it in your cover letter. And last but certainly not least, your cover letter should include your contact information. You need to be able to provide your contact information for the hiring manager so that they can get back to you if they're interested in pursuing you. If you're submitting for a job through an online system that only has upload space for a resume, simply make your cover letter the first page of the document.
Besides your resume and cover letter, there are other materials that you can utilize to help with your job search. For instance, you can use LinkedIn. I personally use LinkedIn every day and highly recommend anyone having it. It's a great way to network with people and follow companies that align with your interests. LinkedIn is a digital extension of your resume. Think about it like a professional Facebook. Use it to elaborate on positions more than you can do so on your one-page resume, or keep it short and simple. Sometimes recruiters even reach out to you directly on LinkedIn. Again, great way to network, even if you're not looking for a new opportunity. Other people use portfolios to help with their job search. How can you use a portfolio to your advantage? You need to think about the industry that you're applying for. For instance, if you're an artist by trade, you can post your work on ArtStation. If you're into coding, you can post your code on GitHub and be active within that community. If you're into communications and you write a ton of articles, you can showcase your work on WordPress. Again, thinking about how you can use these different materials to benefit your job search is really important to consider. And you always want to think about how is it going to benefit you and how is it going to make you stand out from other applicants.
So how do you make all of your materials complement one another and not seem redundant? First, use them to create a brand for yourself. Have everything look similar in terms of design, color, formatting, all of that. Make sure that your formatting from one document to the other is the same so that it's really cohesive and is apparent that it belongs to you. Ensure they flow together and address the same materials. If you address an internship experience in your cover letter, make sure that internship experience is highlighted in your resume. And if you were approved, make sure that you can include somebody from that internship experience, like a supervisor or a team member, in your reference page. And last but not least, use your materials to showcase your personality. Don't go too crazy with formatting, but it's really a great tool to use if you have a color that you really like, or you want to add a color, you want to add a photo, to really personalize your material, like your resume or your cover letter, and really just make your personality stand out from the crowd. Keep in mind that every company may have their own submission guidelines and ask for specific things. If they say to include specific things in your cover letter, to apply or reach out in a specific way, or not to submit something, follow their guidelines. If you don't follow their rules, you'll be excluded from the search without them even considering your experiences. Job searching is a really competitive process, especially now, and you don't want to hurt your chances by not following a company's guidelines.
Let's recap on some of the key takeaways we've talked about during this session. You need to make sure that you have all your materials ready before you begin your job search. Make sure you have the appropriate resume and cover letter, and proofread before you submit them. Tailor your materials to the position. This will make your resume stand out versus a generic catch-all resume. And your materials should flow together and illustrate who you are and what your abilities are. Show who you are, not what you think that the company is looking for. And make sure you show and tell the recruiter that you are the best person for the role and give the appropriate examples. Last but not least, make sure you follow the company guidelines that you are applying for.
Thank you, Jessica and Jennifer, for walking us through all that content. Now, before we transition into the Q&A portion, I would like to highlight the key skills that our viewers were exposed to today. Members will gain experience with analytical and critical thinking as they learn to highlight their previous experiences as skills in their job search materials. By creating those job search materials, members will gain experience with organization and written communication. And at this point, we are going to transition to our questions. As stated earlier, you can launch the Q&A widget from the menu dock to submit your questions. This feature will remain open even in on-demand viewing. So if we do not get to your question, we will respond via email. So we'll go ahead and get started. For our first question, what should I put on my resume if I don't have any experience?
I'm going to go ahead and take a crack at this one. If you don't have any experience to put on your resume, I'm sure that you have at least a little bit. Everybody has done something like cashiering or waitressing, or your experience in AKSI, you're a member, or if you're just a pledge, you're part of your pledge class, you're participating. So you always have something that you can put on. Keep in mind that your resume is going to be pretty short if you don't have a lot of experience to put on, but that's okay. Everybody starts somewhere. So just take your time to think about some of your experiences and put on anything you think may be applicable or have applicable skills to the job you're applying to.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback off what Jennifer said. A really good thing to add as well is you can always add projects, so just listing some of your project experiences as well. Like for instance, if you've worked in a group project where you had to do like a lot of like data analytics type of work, so collecting a lot of data or anything like that, you can always put that project as part of your experience as well.
All right, great, thank you. Moving on to our next question. When should I remove experiences from high school?
That one's a tough one. When should I remove experiences from high school? I honestly, beyond your freshman year, depending on what kind of experience it is, like my high school job, I kept on my application up until really my most recent job, and I'm 2 years out of college. But I also worked for the same company for 7 years. I transitioned from that high school job into a professional full-time position, so that experience was applicable, and I wanted to show how long I had been with that company. So it really just depends on your situation. Would I include that you were in National Honor Society or captain of your sports team or anything like that longer than maybe your freshman year of college? I would consider taking it off at that point, because college is when you really supposed to start accumulating professional experiences, and it's kind of your training ground for professional experience. So getting involved with things like AK Psi or other student orgs like a student government or your residence hall, anything like that, I would start including things like that on your resume and just kind of slowly filter out your high school stuff. I think definitely by the time you get ready to graduate college, everything from high school should be off your resume.
Yeah, I mean, definitely agree with what Jennifer was saying. Just think about how it's applicable. Once you graduate college, you really shouldn't be putting the high school experiences, because you should be putting current relevant experiences on that resume.
All right, and our next question, how do you suggest creating numerical sticks for a resume if you don't have any direct results? For example, I created an email marketing campaign this summer, but I don't have the results from it.
I've never really had to put numeric on a resume. So Jessica, do you have more experience with that?
Yeah, so for example, the email marketing campaign, I don't want to make assumptions, but I would like to say, so with the email marketing, you can take, for instance, how many target people you were trying to reach for that campaign. What's the estimated number of outreaches? What were you trying to look for that campaign? Did you use a new product? Did you do something completely new that nobody has ever done before? Right? If you don't have the numerical statistics for it, showcase why that's important, right? So whether it is with direct results or without direct results, you can always come up with ways to put something numerical with it. Again, you do want to make sure it's truthful, but it's substantial for what you're applying for. So for instance, if you're applying for a more creative role and your email marketing campaign was you created a new design for it, you could say that, because the numeric might not be completely related to, the position you're applying for, so it's all about context.
Perfect. We'll move on to our next question. This has a two-part question. So, if I have a broad range of experiences, should I switch which ones I put on my resume based on the relevance to the position, or should I just put the most recent positions that I've had? And if I do choose based on relevance, should I explain those gaps in my cover letter?
I would say yes, definitely you should put list the experiences that are the most relevant to the position you're applying for first. And if there are significant gaps, then yeah, I would explain that in your cover letter and mention that you have other experience, but have included the most relevant experiences in your resume. And just, that's a great opportunity to drop a line such as, I have other experiences and would be happy to discuss those at a later time, but I've included the most relevant experience in my repertoire in my resume. Something along those lines.
All right, we'll move on to the next question. What should I do if my resume spans more than one page?
Yeah, Jess, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. What I was going to say is, I mean, typically, especially if you're just graduating, I honestly would limit your resume to one page. Just to give context, typically in the industry, those who have resumes more than one page typically tend to be people that have been working for like 15 plus years. You do want to make sure, limit what you put on it. So like, for example, if you have a relevant role that you did in college, like maybe a student job, you can list that as one line, but put more relevant experiences and explain those on your resume. Again, like your resume should be, you know, that one snapshot of your experiences. To be honest, typically if resumes are a little bit longer than one page, and again, it may get glanced over because then, you know, the person reviewing it might think that you're kind of like filling out the page just for, you know, content's sake.
Yeah. Just to kind of piggyback off of that, it kind of depends on what industry you're applying into as well. I work in a tech industry, and our people consult. So part of my job as their HR generalist is to make sure that their resumes are up to date for clients, because, you know, we put out their resumes so that they can be quote unquote hired by clients to do some work on behalf of the company. So I mean, it's not uncommon, especially for some of our senior people, for me to send out 3-4 page resumes. But again, that's people that have been in software development for like 10, 20 years. So, you know, it really depends on the industry. If it's something that you kind of want to highlight how you've grown, that's kind of our reasoning for sending out resumes that long, is because we really want to highlight the experiences that our people have had and what background they're coming from, because that's important information when deciding what kind of developer they are. But if you're going for something like HR or, you know, a more standard business field, I would say definitely, especially at first, because I know with the templates and everything, you kind of run out of room really quickly. So keep it to 1 page, 2 at the very most, if it can be printed front to back. I wouldn't go too much over that.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of, you know, what Jennifer was saying beforehand, you can always use your cover letter to explain, you know, go into detail on, you know, your particular experiences on your resume. So you can save the room on your resume, and if it is extremely relevant to what you're applying for, you can always explain it in your cover letter.
Okay, thanks so much. Our next question, how can I add personality to a resume so it stands out?
My roommate is sitting in the room with me, and she's probably, her jaw is going to fall when she hears me say this, but I really have enjoyed the look of templates in Microsoft Word right now. Her jaw did drop, for those of you wondering, because they're a little bit more customizable now than they were like 5 years ago, and adding a little bit of color to your resume, even something as simple as just like putting your heading with your name and your address in a different color that's not hard to read, a different color, a different font, make it stand out from the rest, make it a little bigger, you know, so it stands out a little bit. It kind of adds your own personal flair depending on how that looks to you when you picture in your head, making it stand out, what that looks like to you. So you can do that in any number of ways that are completely unique to you and that won't look like the next resume in the pile.
All right. Jessica, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, exactly what Jennifer was saying, you know, definitely play around with the font. And like she was saying as well, make sure, any colors that you do use aren't really hard to read. You can also include, so when you're formatting your resume, you can always play around like with the margins and everything like that. You can find a ton of examples of creative resumes online as well. So I know there's like a really popular resume that I believe a marketing agency did for like Elon Musk. And his experiences, you can always like pick and choose from those really creative resumes and kind of incorporate it into yours so it doesn't look like just, words on a page, right?
All right, and we'll move on. This is our last question right now. So to our viewers, if you have any other questions, be sure to submit them now. How can I optimize resumes for applicant tracking systems?
Yeah, so that is a common question. My suggestion would be to any roles that you're applying for, look at the keywords that they have. So look at the minimum qualification skills as well as the preferred qualifications for the roles, and see what kind of skill sets you have overlapped with them. So like, for example, if they have, like if they need somebody that's very strong in Microsoft Excel, for example, make sure you list those experiences. Like, for example, maybe you worked on a school project where you had to do like data collection on Microsoft Excel. You can add that to, explaining that in your resume, and that will help because typically when people are looking, or at least, in recruiting, when they are looking at resumes, they're looking to see, how many keywords there are in a particular person's resume in correlation to the role.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add there, just purely because I've never used like a software that tracks keywords in resumes, so I'm not as familiar with that part of recruiting and staffing, so I think Jessica's answer was perfect.
All right, thank you guys. Those are all the questions we have for now. Jessica and Jennifer, do you have any last thoughts you'd like to add, about resumes and cover letters or the job search process as a whole?
Yeah, I think it's really important, especially now if you're still in school, definitely utilize your Career Center. And don't be afraid to show your resume and get feedback from people. That definitely helped me when I was, an active member. That definitely helped me in regards to just putting my resume out there. Even after college, I always ask like people that I went to that were in my chapter. I mean, like to this day, I ask my big for resume help and just reviewing my resume, even if I'm not currently actively looking. It's always good to get other people's input.
Absolutely. I'm going to kind of echo what Jessica said and expand a little bit. Absolutely utilize your Career Center. Ours at I went to Ball State, and ours had a mock interview program that you could sign up to do a mock interview, and they would grade your performance, tell you, what you could do a little bit better. You could submit like a certain position that you were applying for and really use it as interview practice. So if your school has a program like that in place, find out. Call your career services office and see what they've got to offer you as far as interviewing and resume review. And definitely ask people to look over your resume, your cover letter, all of that kind of thing, because, you're going to be looking at it for hours and hours, and somebody else might catch mistakes that you don't, or, incontinuity or something like that completely gets missed because you've spent so much time looking at it. And as far as, the job search process and the applying and the interviewing, it is a lot of pressure. It is really, really stressful to be in that process. And it really is a marathon, not a sprint, to start applying to jobs and interviewing. And I just would stress not to take like no response from an application, because sometimes what's going to happen, you're going to submit an application and you're just not going to hear back. Or even, you know, a negative interview experience if you get declined a job. Don't take that personally, because it's really competitive and it's really easy to let that get you down. But just keep in mind that there are lots of other people in the same pool, and just because you may not have gotten the job or you may not have gotten the call back, that doesn't mean that you did anything wrong. That just means that somebody else really wowed them, you know? So don't be afraid to follow up on applications. Be yourself. Try and relax and really bring yourself and your personality to each part of the interview, from start to finish, from application to offer letter. Really just focus on being authentically you and maintain that professionalism that we know you're learning in AK Sci. And don't be afraid to let your skills shine.
Great. Well, Jessica and Jennifer, thank you again so much for your insight and for joining us. And same to our viewers for joining us tonight. For any follow-up questions or conversation about this program, please contact education@aksci.org. Be sure to check out the resource list again to access more information about resumes and cover letters, as well as more AK Sci webinars.